This morning on BRN, the top 7 food label myths. Joining me now is Michelle Miller, also known as the Farm Babe. Michelle, so great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And you wrote a great piece, the top 7 food label myths. Let's start with some basics here. I guess people don't always read the nutritional labels, or maybe don't always understand what's in those nutritional labels.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. And there's just a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of noise all around us in the grocery store of what may or may not hold any merit.
Yeah, and you really need, in today's world, you got to be a prudent customer, a consumer when it comes to your healthcare, your retirement, and also what you're putting in your bodies, either your body or your family's bodies. Let's start with some myths that you outlined in a recent article. It was a great article. If you don't mind, I'd like to tick off the myths and have you kind of dispel them because you did a great job doing this. Let's start off with the first myth, which is organic means pesticide free. So does it?
No.
Okay, move on. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Myth number one. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think a lot of people think, oh, organic doesn't use any pesticides. And that's not true. So I myself was a commercial scale farmer in Iowa. We grew, GMO crops, non-GMO crops, organic gardening, whatever you want to, whichever way you want to put it. And now I live in Florida, and down here in Florida, especially, we have really hot, humid, wet weather, which can draw pests. And so the only difference between regular conventionally farmed farming with those pesticides versus organic pesticides are that organic tend to be a little bit more natural. But natural doesn't mean anything in terms of toxicity. And natural, some of the more outdated organic type approved products may be a little bit more toxic than the conventionally produced pesticides that were invented for a reason. Pesticides have been used in agriculture for thousands of years. And anybody who's ever had a garden or something knows that, when you have delicious fruit, we want to eat it, we like to eat it, but so do bugs and lots of pests. So farmers have tens of thousands of species of insects, weeds, disease, all of that they have to combat. And organic isn't an exception to that. So that's a pretty big myth.
Yeah, that is a big myth because I think a lot of people think that it's kind of maybe grown in a bubble. Yeah, I think about that John Travolta
Yeah.
movie, Boy in a Bubble, and I think about how not, it's a great movie, great story, but I think people think that it is just, it's free of everything. It's free of all toxins.
Yeah, no, that's not true. And also, it kind of depends too upon the economies of scale and where it's grown. Like you can find, so myself, when I was farming in Iowa, we had some acreage that were never sprayed, but we weren't organic. So there can be farmers that aren't organic that never have to spray pesticides. And then there are some that are organic that may have to spray more frequently. So it depends, are we talking about a small scale farm, or are we talking about thousands of acres of subsistence to feed the world, which we need? I think sometimes people puts a target on the back of big ag, but the reality is that farmers are 1% of the population of North America and are required to feed 100% of us. And we're losing 3 acres of farmland every minute to urban development. So how do we keep farmers on their land, and how do we keep farmers in business? And what that means is that they're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to have a farm, to have that ROI, to stay in the green, to stay in business. You have to have a crop. And it's up to us as professional farmers to do what we do best to make sure that we have a crop. And so we don't want to spray. We hope we don't have to, but sometimes that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and again, it's important to be a prudent consumer and understand what is actually going into the products you're buying, because organic, Michelle, has really become a brand. It's like a label instead of what. And I think people don't really know what it means.
Yeah, and I do want to point out though, okay, so like some people say, oh, organic farmers use natural methods and then use pesticides as a last resort. I would argue that non-organic farmers feel the same way. Nobody wants to, pesticides are very expensive, they're very time consuming to apply. It's always any farmer's last resort, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's the last resort and sometimes it has to be done. But I do want to note though that the dose always makes the poison. So I think sometimes people think we're just out there spraying constantly, and pesticides could be applied at a rate of 5 ounces per acre. It could be 10. But maximum, I mean, I'll just bring up these water bottles because I have them next to me. you're looking at about this much, maybe this, on an area of land the size of a football field. So it's very minimal. It's a very fine mist that's sprayed over an area of land the size of a football field. And then there's still on an acre. So there's still withdrawal periods and times. There's a lot of checks and balances in place. There's still a lot of testing that's done behind the scenes to make sure we have a safe and healthy food supply. So the reason I share this with people is not to say like, oh, organic is so bad. It's not that anything is bad. And we all know as consumers to wash your produce before you eat it. It's still the most healthy thing you can consume. But a lot of the fear-based marketing is trying to say, oh, these conventional foods or these GMOs are just drenched in pesticides. When it's like, I mean, I was a GMO farmer and we sprayed like one day a year, maybe two, at the very beginning of the growing season. So there's the myths out there that one is so bad and one is so good, but the reality is way more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's talk about this next one. And again, I wish I could go. We're going to have to bring you back to talk more about farming, and also I want to talk about some of the challenges that farmers are facing today. But let's talk about antibiotic-free means healthier meat. That's another myth, right?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, if farmers, again, farmers don't want to use antibiotics, but they are a very important tool in the toolbox. If antibiotics are used, there's always that withdrawal period before animals can legally go to market, which means that all meat is in fact antibiotic free. It is tested, it is approved, and farmers don't want to use them. Now, it's become a lot more difficult in recent years for farmers to attain antibiotics, which I think is good and bad, because, like I said, they are an important tool. However, we're seeing a huge shift. You can see chicken in the store that says no antibiotics ever. So there is a difference between the labels. One label will say no antibiotics ever. One will say antibiotic free. There is a difference. So no antibiotics ever means what it says. Antibiotic free means we could have been using an antibiotic, but regardless, it's antibiotic free due to that withdrawal time. So at the end of the day, there are no antibiotics in your meat, milk, dairy, period. Eggs, nothing. It's all antibiotic free.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Michelle, and I hate to cut our interview short. We're not going to get short, but there's so much more here, and that's why I said I think we need to bring you back. But how can we be better consumers and look at these labels and understand? Sometimes I feel like you need almost like a dictionary or a thesaurus to understand some of the terms on those food labels. Because I look at things like fat, I look at the main ingredients, I see where sugar is as an example, carbohydrates versus fats. But how do we train ourselves to be better consumers and to understand exactly what we're putting in our bodies?
Sure. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with, I mean, if I heard an expression once that I always liked, if you can't pick it or kill it, don't eat it. Like we all know that an apple is better for you than an Oreo, or everything in moderation, like have a slice of pizza, not the entire pizza. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of checks and balances in place to ensure food safety. But I'm a big fan of buying local if you can support your own community, or buy USA grown to keep farmers on the land, to support our own economics in our own country, I think is really important. But just realizing that, if you are not buying organic produce, you're not a bad person, you're not a bad parent. Farmers do a great job regardless of size or label. And so just try to eat healthy, natural foods. Fewer processed foods will be common sense, the best thing you can do. But that, I always try to buy what's local or what's on sale or what tastes the best, stuff like that.
And buying, the perimeters typically of the supermarket or grocery store, large or small, is probably where the freshest things typically are. Michelle, we're going to have to leave it there. As I said, we're going to have to bring you back. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Yes, thank you. You as well.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details are at our website. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.